They told you silence was a weakness. They told you that people who go quiet when they're hurt are fragile, broken, too sensitive to function in a world that rewards the loud, the aggressive, the ones who fight back immediately. You believed them. And that belief has been slowly destroying you. What if silence doesn't retreat? What if the people who go quiet when they're hurt are actually operating on a completely different psychological frequency? One that most people will never understand, because most people have never had the discipline to control themselves at the moment it costs the most. What you're about to hear isn't comfort, it's a reckoning, the architecture of silence. There is a moment, you know the moment, where something inside you cracks. Someone betrays you, someone dismisses you, someone takes exactly what you gave in trust and throws it back at you like it meant nothing. And at that moment, most people explode. They cry, they yell, they send the message they'll regret. They perform their pain like it's theatre, because somewhere deep in their psychology, they believe that if they bleed loudly enough, someone will come to stop the bleeding. But you didn't do that. You went quiet, and the world looked at you and said something was wrong with you. Here is the first truth. Silence is not the absence of feeling. It is the containment of feeling. There is a profound difference between someone who feels nothing and someone who feels everything and chooses, in the fire of that moment, to say nothing. One is emptiness. The other is control. And control, in a world of reactive, emotionally incontinent people, is one of the rarest and most misunderstood forms of power that exists. Most people confuse expression with processing. They think that if they don't externalize the pain will fester. What they don't understand is that people who go quiet aren't suppressing. They're observing. They're watching. They're filing away every piece of information that this moment is offering them, about the person who hurt them, about the situation, about themselves, with a clarity that raw emotional reaction would destroy. You go quiet because you're actually paying attention. The predator doesn't announce the hunt. Understand this about the natural world. The lion does not roar when it's preparing to strike. It goes completely still. Every resource it has, every sense, every muscle, every ounce of focused energy is directed inward. It is not performing. It is calculating. People who go quiet when they're hurt operate on this same instinct, whether they know it or not. When you have been wounded and you withdraw, you are doing something that the loud, the reactive, the emotionally explosive cannot do. You are refusing to give information to people who may not deserve it. Your pain is intelligence. Your grief is data. Your anger is a weapon. And weapons in the hands of someone who understands power are never discharged carelessly. Think about what happens when you react immediately. You reveal how much something affected you. You show your pressure points. You hand a map of your vulnerabilities to exactly the person who just demonstrated they're willing to use them. Every tear, every raised voice, every desperate text sent at 2 in the morning is a confession. And that confession can be used against you. Silence in this context is not passivity, it is a strategy. But there is something deeper here. Something that has nothing to do with strategy at all, the inner world that nobody sees. Here is what people don't understand about those who go quiet when they're hurt. The silence is not the end of the process. It is the beginning. Inside that stillness, there is a war happening that would terrify most people if they could see it. You are not doing nothing. You are dismantling the entire narrative of what just happened. You are asking hard questions. Was this person ever what I thought they were? Where did I allow my own blindness to make me complicit in this? What does this moment reveal about what I actually value versus what I told myself I valued? What needs to change? Not in them, because you cannot change people, but in you. This is not rumination, this is excavation. Most people avoid this process because it is brutal. It is far easier to externalize pain than to internalize its lessons. It is far easier to make someone else the villain in your story than to ask why you kept giving them the weapon they used. The people who go loud when they're hurt are, in many cases, trying to skip this step. The noise is a distraction from the mirror. You went quiet because some part of you knew, even if you couldn't articulate it, that there was something in this moment worth understanding. And understanding cannot happen in chaos. The world does not reward this. The world looks at your silence and calls it coldness. It calls it detachment. It calls it emotional unavailability. And in doing so, it reveals its own shallowness, its inability to distinguish between someone who has nothing to say and someone who is choosing, very deliberately, when and to whom they will speak. The hidden cost of going quiet. Now I have to tell you something that will be uncomfortable, because everything up to this point may have felt like vindication, and vindication is seductive. But this is not a script designed to flatter you. It is designed to sharpen you. Going quiet when you're hurt has a shadow side, and if you do not understand it, it will hollow you out from the inside. Silence is power only when it leads somewhere, when it is a bridge to clarity, to decision, to action. When the stillness is purposeful, a deliberate withdrawal so that you can return with something stronger than you had before. But silence becomes a prison when it is simply avoidance wearing the mask of dignity. When you tell yourself you're being strategic, but what you're actually doing is protecting yourself from a conversation that needs to happen. From vulnerability you've decided is beneath you. From connection you've convinced yourself you don't need. There is a version of silence that is sovereignty, and there is a version that is just loneliness with better branding. You have to know which one you're in. The question to ask yourself is this: does my silence move me forward, or does it keep me still? Is this quiet a river, something that has current, direction, destination? Or is it a pond, self-contained and slowly going stagnant? The most dangerous thing about people who go quiet when they're hurt is not that they feel too little. It is that they sometimes feel so much, for so long, completely alone, that the feeling calcifies. And what was once a wound becomes a wall. What was once wisdom becomes armor. And armor, worn long enough, stops being protection and starts being isolated. This is the corruption of the gift, the language they speak that nobody hears. People who go quiet when they're hurt communicate constantly. You simply have to learn to listen at a different frequency. They communicate through distance. When they begin to create space where there was once closeness, that is not indifference. That is a statement. They are saying, something happened, and I am deciding what it means and whether this relationship deserves my continued investment. They communicate through changed behavior. The person who once checked on you and has now stopped isn't forgetting you. They are recalibrating. They gave something, and something happened to what they gave. They are figuring out how to give differently, or whether to give at all. They communicate through what they no longer share. When someone who once opened to you goes suddenly guarded, when the conversation stays on the surface where it used to go deep, they are not being cruel. They are being cautious. They have learned something, and they are integrating that lesson. And the lesson has changed the terms of their openness. Most people miss all of this because most people are not paying attention to absence. They are only trained to respond to presence, to noise, to demand, to the obvious. The subtle language of someone who goes quiet is invisible to anyone who has never had to go quiet themselves. And this creates one of the most painful ironies in human connection. The people who feel most deeply often appear, to the untrained eye, to feel the least. What it does to relationships. Let me be precise about something that most discussions of this subject refuse to address honestly. Going quiet when you're hurt is not always the other person's failure to understand you. Sometimes it is your failure to be understood. And there is a cost to that. If you are someone who withdraws in pain, you have almost certainly experienced the following. Someone hurt you. You went quiet. They did not notice. Or they noticed and did not know how to respond. And the silence grew until the relationship began to die of it. And part of you watched this happen and could not bring yourself to break the silence even as something valuable disappeared. This is not a character flaw, but it is a pattern, and patterns that are not examined become chains. The most powerful version of yourself is not the one who never needs anything. That is not power, that is performance. The most powerful version of yourself is the one who can choose silence with full awareness, use it when it serves, and break it when breaking it requires more courage than keeping it. The one who can sit in the vulnerability of saying, "This hurt me, and here is why, and here is what I need," not from weakness, but from a place so secure that honesty costs nothing. That is the version of silence that becomes speech when speech is required. That is the integration of the gift, the identity at the center. You have to understand what kind of person you are before you can decide what to do with what you are. People who go quiet when they're hurt tend to share a particular architecture. They are deeply internal. They process through thought before feeling, or through feeling so private that thought and emotion are indistinguishable from the outside. They have high standards for themselves and for others. And betrayal, even minor betrayal, creates a fracture that takes time to assess. They are often extraordinarily loyal before something breaks, and extraordinarily difficult to reach after it does. They are not cold people. They are people who run hot, privately, and have learned, through experience or through necessity, that the heat needs to be managed before it is expressed. If this is you, you already know the loneliness of it. The experience of sitting with something enormous while someone looks at you and sees nothing. The exhaustion of containment. The strange grief of being fundamentally difficult to read in a world that mistakes transparency for depth. But you also know the strength of it. The decisions you've made with clarity that others made in chaos. The things you did not say that would have destroyed something. The times your silence preserved a dignity that noise would have demolished. The version of yourself you return to, after the quiet, that was harder, sharper, more precise than the one that went in. That is the forge. That is what the silence is for. The moment of choice. There comes a point, and it is coming for you if it has not already arrived, where you will have to decide what you do with all of this. The old version of you used silence as a shelter, a place to hide from a world that was too loud, too careless, too willing to handle what you gave it with clumsy hands. The old version of you equated silence with safety, and for a time, it was. For a time, it protected you from things you were not yet ready to survive. But that version of you has served its purpose. It is time to kill it. Not the silence, not the depth, not the ability to go still when the world wants you to break. Those are yours. Those are permanent. Those are the architecture of everything you will build from here. What you have to kill is the belief that silence is the final answer. The belief that containment is the same as completion. The belief that because you survived alone, you must continue alone. The belief that vulnerability, chosen, deliberate, offered on your terms, is a form of weakness rather than the final expression of genuine power. The most dangerous person in any room is not the loudest. It is the one who has been quiet long enough to understand exactly what they are doing and why, who has processed every wound into wisdom, who has converted every silence into precision, who opens their mouth, finally, and says exactly what needs to be said to exactly the right person, at exactly the right moment, and means every word. That person is what you are becoming. What happens now? Most people who watch this will feel seen for the first time in a long time, and then go back to exactly who they were. They will collect the insight the way people collect things they never use, a feeling of recognition without transformation. That is not you. That cannot be you. Not after this. The choice in front of you is not between silence and noise. It is between silence that diminishes you and silence that builds you, between distance that protects and distance that imprisons, between the version of you that goes quiet because you're afraid and the version that goes quiet because you're dangerous, because you are thinking, calculating, preparing to return with something the world was not ready for. Go back into your silence now if you need to. Use it the way it was meant to be used, but when you come out, and you will come out transformed. Most people will never understand what you went through there. That's exactly how it should be. If this found you at the right moment, if something in this cracked a door that has been sealed for too long, then stay, because there is more, and it only gets harder and cleaner and more precise from here. Most won't follow, but you weren't most people. That's why you're still here.